Welcome back to our third and final part of cleaning the 1859 Sharps. I'm First Sergeant Kemp, and now we have had everything cleaned. We cleaned the barrel and the receiver in boiling hot soapy water. We cleaned the block and all of its parts in boiling hot soapy water. And anything else that was left over, we either cleaned and seasoned, starting with the hot water or with a cleaner such as Ballistol and a nylon brush. Wiping everything dry to the touch, paying close attention to all of our bolt and screw threads so the patch is clean. Once we seasoned everything with boar butter, we wiped it all down. We ran patches through the barrel until they came out looking exactly the same way as they looked when they went in. Remember, patches are a lot less expensive than your rifle was. If it takes 30 patches, if it takes 50 patches, keep going until the patch comes out clean. Don't rely on the fact that, oh, well, the inside of my barrel looks clean enough. That might work just fine for a field clean at a reenactment, but when you're going to set this away for a little while, you want to make sure it is spotless. At any point of the reassembly process, if you happen to catch a nook or a cranny you might have missed, don't pass it over. Make sure you get all of that black powder residue off of your firearm. Because remember, black powder is hygroscopic. If you leave it, it will attract moisture, which will attract corrosion, rust, and the deterioration of your rifle. So now that it's all spotless, we're going to put it all back together. Now, this video series is intended for new and old reenactors, people just interested in the firearm. But this is also a really great way to help train new reenactors, and so that way when we have new recruits come to our event, we can cut them loose with cleaning one of the rifles and not have to micromanage them too much because they've been able to watch this video series. One thing that I like to do when I teach people new to the 1859 Sharps is to start with the pieces that you are familiar with the most from the cleaning process, and then you can eliminate your pile of screws and bolts till you only have a few left that, well, that one's a thread longer, that one's a thread shorter. So what I advise is start with the block, because the parts on the block are the most unique to that one piece. It's all boiled, seasoned, clean, inside and out. Check for proper airflow, just like that. So the first part that I do, this assembly pattern doesn't really matter too much. You could put the flash in before the cone or the cone. Some of your rifles, some of your Sharps rifles, this will not come out. It's not a big deal. Hand thread it, and if yours removes like mine does, take your tool, snug it up a little bit. It doesn't have to be super tight because your clean out screw has to fit in behind it. Then using your screwdriver set with all the proper screwdriver bits, you drive in your clean out screw. Remember what I said? Always, always, always take out the clean out screw. Then we replace the cones, been cleaned inside out, scrubbed with bristle cleaners, brushes, and ever so gently with a welder's pick for excessive buildup. And that goes on. Give it a little snug with the cone wrench. Now mine has the 3 rubber washers that go over there. Those all slide on. Use my screwdriver to make sure they're all flat and in line. Then I take my cover. On some of the old Sharps rifles, this is all one piece. This doesn't come off at all. So it just depends on what your make and model and generation of Sharps rifle is. Then we took off the lever. So I always instruct, hold the block as it would sit in the rifle, so that way you don't put the lever on backwards. So take that, make sure I turn myself around properly. Lever goes back, and it goes, sometimes it's a little fiddly. Right in. I always try to hand thread my screws so that way you don't have any concerns about cross-threading. If this is properly cared for and properly cleaned, you should be able to finger screw all these things in nice, just like that. So that part's done. We can set that aside and forget about it. Now we're going to come back over to the barrel and the receiver and start reassembling it. The other unique parts that you can start with is the lever pin release button. So the tiny point comes out and it points out on the right side by where the lever spring is. So we carefully drop that back down into the hole, put the spring behind it, and then we run it down with the cover screw. And just like that, give it a little check. Sometimes these get worn. That spring on the inside gets worn, and I highly recommend that you replace that spring. Places such as VTI gun parts have replacement springs that you can purchase for your sharps rifle, because if that spring gets worn and this button isn't keeping pressure on your lever pin, the pin can come off and your block can fall out. That's safe and a really expensive thing to lose, so you don't want to do that. Replace your parts if they're worn or damaged as soon as you can. So our pile of parts is slowly getting down there. Now we have our lever spring. Goes on like this. And this is why too, if you are new to this type of rifle, it's worth your time to search online for the parts diagram. I scanned the Pedersoli one. We have a lot of Pedersolis in our unit. So I scanned that one, and that's available on our website, and others are linked up around the web. So those two go together. I'm going to put my front sight or my rear sight back on. Remember, this guy uses a smaller screw. Use the right bits, whether you're using a $35 Wheeler gunsmithing screwdriver kit or you're using a Harbor Freight multi-bit screwdriver. Just make sure you have the right bits. This doesn't have to be the world's most expensive toolkit. It just needs to be practical. Now this part is done. Now we are ready to start putting the big parts together. So, barrel and receiver onto the buttstock. Now all these next three pieces kind of need to go on at roughly the same time. Trigger assembly goes on. There we go. Parts. Just a little bit off there. There we go. Then we put the block plate. Sometimes you have to wiggle the trigger a little bit so everything lines up on the inside. Now I will hold it, and I always know that the wood screw goes on the back of the trigger assembly. And replacing my driver bit again. Put it on top. Run it home. Now on some of these rifles, especially the older ones, on this part of the process, you may not want to snug these down completely tight right away. Just so that way all your bolt holes have some wiggle room as you line them all up for the final stretch. And that way you minimize your risk of cross-threading any of your bolts or screws. So then we have top ones go in, and that will hold the receiver to the trigger assembly. So now everything's still loose. Just don't forget that you have to tighten everything. Okay, that one goes in. That one goes in on the back side. One thing you'll notice, especially if you buy a brand new Sharps rifle, is, and I'm talking about the Italian ones, is this rear lock plate screw. When you get it out of the box, it's going to be flush. But as the wood and everything begins to compress, you're going to have a bit of a tail. And actually, I think I have these two backwards. But even still, your rear screw may come out a thread or two over time. It's not the end of the world. It just might be a comfort issue. So I'll switch that one later. Now we got everything in play. We install, I like to install the block. And you line it up. You don't want to go too high, but essentially just kind of eyeball it so it looks flush. Then you line up your lever. Take your lever pin. And especially on the new ones, these things will be tight. If you get an old used Sharps, these things just kind of slide right on in. The only problem right now is I'm doing this on a slippery table. There we go. Snaps on the pin, pin's all the way down. Now we're ready for the force stop. Goes back on. Bolt those in the back. This is all pretty simple, and if you lay all your parts out, it'll go together real nice. But like you might just have to mess things around, move things around a little bit if you get confused. This is the middle one. Just take your time, make sure you don't have any interruptions or confusions, and if you need to go and take a break, do so. So you want to be safe. You want to make sure everything goes back together the way it's supposed to. Get all our barrel bands on, got the block in, block functions, full cock, hold your thumb on the hammer, touch it, okay? Set trigger and front trigger work, half cock it, didn't go off, so the safety function is working properly. Now sometimes I've seen throughout the course of cleaning it that the set screw adjustment right there will twist in or out, and when the soldier gets his rifle reassembled, it'll either not half cock or it'll catch, and 9 times out of 10 it's just this simple adjustment. You just work this screw back and forth until everything starts working again. Very rarely will you have something like a bad sear, or on an older model you might have a trigger lever that's just been worn down and it's not raising the sear high enough to kick the hammer down. It's usually simple things like that. Also too, always try to keep some extra cones on hand for your make and model. Pedersoli threads are slightly different than the other ones, so make sure you special order those. You may not just be able to pick those up at your local sporting goods store. These will get worn through excessive age and may not allow it to fire properly, so you want to make sure that's good and safe. And once you're all reassembled, everything's functioning, double check everything for tightness, and everything's still really greasy. Remember, you want your rifle clean and dry to the touch. You don't want to leave excess oil. You don't want to get your powder oily. You don't want to get your case or your sleeve oily. Oil will also attract dust and dirt, and that can cause abrasion or fouling, jamming. Clean up your stock. Reassemble your sling wherever you like it. And there you have a cleaned and reassembled 1859 bird and sharps rifle. Thank you so much for watching our series on cleaning and care for the sharps rifle. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments box down below. If you like the videos, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have further information to look up about Company D of the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters, about reenacting, about sharps, the cleaning kits, anything, please visit our website at www.2nduss.com. Thank you.